Yeah, you can just start, John. Yeah, we're all good. That's all good. We're all good. Thank you. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm John Beard with Beard Planning Design. And we've got a presentation on the comprehensive plan, local waterfront revitalization program, and the zoning update. Final drafts are out on the wild, if you would. And so our agenda is pretty simple. We're going to introduce ourselves and folks here, and we'll review the process to date for making this plan and the local waterfront revitalization program. We're going to review these briefly with you and discuss the next steps and have some feedback and discussions. It's nice to be joined by the mayor of Fair City tonight. Mayor Rose Press, thanks for being here. Members of the public, thank you for coming. The media, great to have you here. We've been working with a team from the planning department, Matthew Miller, the development director, and Alicia Bartlett, city planner, is here. And Shirley Marvin is here. Been helping. There's other folks too who kind of graduated or moved on from city planning and were big contributors. The private consultant here is technical issue. We're okay. Okay. Of course. All right. The prime consultant on the project is Saratoga Associates, and it's with Daniel Shear here and Emily Gardner. And in addition to myself, there's other members of our company been helping with this project. And it's great time to be here. At this point where we have a final draft of this plan. It's been a long haul. And so let's see here. This is the mouse. Let's see. I think it'll work. Wait, is this? Okay. Okay.
Lisa's got it.
Thank you. It's kind of like you to it. It's like
It's gonna go very elaborately like that.
I'm not really driving the car. In the back.
There's a car background behind you.
I'll just come back at the right. And so what is a comprehensive plan? It's not like this is an everyday event, right, for any community. So it's a long-term perspective on the city's future. It's typically updated every 10 years or so. Incorporates community input, community values, and also it's a roadmap looking ahead to the future. It sets goals and sets strategies and policies, but it's not a law per se. It's more of policy guide or strategic, almost a business plan, if you will, for really important actions for the city today. So laws and things like that will come later, and so will projects. And a comprehensive plan is meant to provide policy guidance for future decisions so that they conform with the policies outlined in the plan. So the process has been involved. The mayor, the council helped set this up. We've the development office, as it says, has been leading from inside City Hall, from around the city. We had a project advisory committee, which was a pretty robust group of folks, volunteers, to guide the process, provide review and feedback. We helped support the outreach efforts, and we hosted some of the events with us. Consultant team and the staff are kind of co-authors, I would say, of this document. And the community, we had a great success with that the output. The comprehensive plan that is currently in place in the city is kind of like an old car, 1999 era, still runs. But it's like another, it's not as up to date, it's not as current, doesn't have the latest things that you might want in a something that's as important to this. So it's great that the city has gotten to this point. There's been a lot of long range planning efforts though, so it's not that the city's short on planning, as you know, right? And so there's a sidebar here with some of those plans and studies, including the bike infrastructure plan, beach improvements plan. So these things are all happening in the background of this comprehensive plan. And I'm not going to go through every date, but we kicked this off April 22nd, 2020. Fast forward to the first public presentation of the draft plan was August 1st, 2022. And here we are in November 2022. And a lot of activity in between. There's a lot of community input along the way. Here's the word map of some of the locations with the signs, Plattsburgh for people, nature, community. And inside the document, the document does a pretty good job of describing the process that we went through. And there's a title of the plan that's called Plattsburgh Thriving City. And I know you're at the edge of your seats wanting to know that's a logical root of the word flag. I was, right? And it really goes back to an old Norse Danish word, which means to seize, to hold on to, right? And I think that is interesting, something that we want to hold on to. Interestingly, it's connected to the word sustainability, which also has its tenacity, its tendency, it also needs to hold on to. So I think it's my message for that is it's a city and community that's worth holding on to. That's a thriving city. And it also being a thriving city, that means that it brings together different aspects, vibrancy. We'll talk a little bit more about that, core principles. These are some of the words from one of our committee members, and we'll repeat that here. In the sense, the city is well positioned to continue to offer an excellent quality of life for current residents and to be among the sought after destinations for new residents. Whether seeking a great education in a beautiful setting, seeking refuge from devastating weather, climate events, refuge from political justice, coming here, I'll add some now, coming here for a job, coming here to create jobs, coming here to just spend time on your boat, come to Plattsburgh, we'll be glad you did. And a little sidebar, I came to Plattsburgh with four of my brothers and sisters. We all graduated from Plattsburgh today. I'm very grateful to this town and to the university. So looking at part of the plan, the introduction is a little community snapshot, a little bit of overview of some of the numbers, some of the demographics of the city. We looked at existing conditions, land use, population trends, housing, economy, some of the recreation trends. And also in the plan is a story about who you are, who this community, who you want to be, the roadmap to get there. The core characteristics of sustainability, diversity, resiliency, and vibrancy. And we did all this kind of hit the coronavirus pandemic hit right in the middle, beginning of this project. We went through, here's one of our Zoom meetings that we have, many Zoom meetings, and I think it was wonderful how folks participated. We had board meetings, if you would, by Zoom, and that was interesting. And also maybe better attended than it would have had if we actually called a real meeting, I think. So that was nice. And discussions were quite lively. So the vision for the city is one of the vibrancy and overall recognizing the history of the city, its culture, and the mixed use fabric that you have right now, walkable neighborhoods, abundant affordable housing. We all know there's room for improvement, right? There's always room for improvement in housing. There's always room for improvement. And fortunately, the city has a strong base of renewable energy, hydroelectric power that we're benefiting from. Environmental sustainability responsibility is a core value and vision. It's part of the heart of the North Country. It's walkable, a micropolitan destination city. We know that's what it is, but that's also the vision of the future, right? It's adaptable, we're preserving unique identity, celebrating culture. What a rich culture for the Native Americans, right? I'm not further modern art here in town. Balanced economy with local entrepreneurs and international companies. Renowned access to recreation and appreciation for natural assets. I'm gonna stop right there. There's a lot to be grateful for in this city. Right? Think about, a lot of cities don't have a class for gas. And the natural assets here, we talk about that, they're world class, and we can tell you that. Other people in the world need to know that. And some of the guidance systems that also need to be updated, zoning and development systems that facilitate balance improvements is an important part, and it's an important project that's recommended. So pleased the city is moving forward with that. Equity, affordable housing, range of services, and recognition. So that's quite a vision, and when you read the plan, the vision statement is not a compact, right? It's several pages, and those words came from the committee. I think if you read through it, it speaks to a really bright future about a walkable city, about bike, being able to bicycle around for folks to get around. Talks about a 15-minute neighborhood. And within the plan, there's a lot of attention. Remember, the community development staff is writing these policy guides. Okay, that's the list of the guides, natural resources, right down to economic development, and some of the core characteristics of this city and of the plan. Kind of over and above is that the idea of this equitable city, which means fairness, right? It means opportunity, the vibrant city, which means culture and arts and activities and recreational part of it. It's resilient, means that there's infrastructure in place, there's backup systems in place, there's a social network here to help. And putting that all together, you have a thriving city, something that really holds on to, really be proud of. So I'm going to just read each of these objectives, these main goals, each of these categories. The natural resources, to improve and protect the quality of Lake Champlain and the Saranac River and the city's watersheds and active areas and open spaces. Infrastructure accessibility, to consistently pursue funding for water, sewer, and other essential infrastructure projects as a sound-minded objective. These investments only address immediate needs and can be leveraged to fund future projects against other community goals. Community resources, strengthen the relationship between educational institutions and the city. Recreation, expand parks and trails for sustainable all age, all ability, year-round outdoor activities. Enhance biking and walking infrastructure to promote local recreation, tourism, and leverage regional partnerships, expand existing recreation programs and opportunities. So you can see recreation is a big part of the comprehensive. Arts and culture. Continue to accelerate local arts, culture, and entertainment by embracing creativity as a public asset. Historic resource. Promote this historic preservation as a key strategy for economic and community development. I'm just going to quickly sidebar a couple of examples. Think of New York City and the importance of arts in your city's economy. It's some people consider it's #1 business that makes the city tick, not just finance, but the arts. Promote historic preservation as a key strategy for economic development. That's really important for this city. I think it's a tremendous opportunity to continue to develop that. But it's an economic development asset as well as a cultural asset. Housing, foster housing stock that meets the diverse needs of residents across all phases of life. When you look at the city, you can see the age of the housing stock. You got some older housing that's was built way before energy codes. You got some newer stock. So there's a lot of needs. There's a lot of housing needs, but that means there's also opportunities as well. So this is an important goal. Economic development. Effectively market the city's assets. Support business investment downtown as well as uptown. And with regional partners like the Department of Transportation, like the county, like the town of Plattsburgh. These folks from the outside don't look at this as just one place. They look at the whole region. Right. I think the position is great for the city. So in terms of land use and zoning, here's some of the bullet points. Anticipate the needs, look for strategically planned growth, reflecting modern planning principles, and thorough and thoughtful zoning updates. And some of the strategy points include a 15-minute neighborhood. That's a neighborhood where you can get many of the services and activities that we need in daily life within a 15-minute walk. Okay, whether it's recreation, whether it's pharmacy, kind of things that can be help built this kind of a neighborhood. Highlight the waterfront. That's a really important piece of it. I know that Emily's going to speak more about that in the future in the few minutes. Strengthen priority areas. There's a few areas, some of the highway corridors, some of the commercial districts are really important areas where there are also some of those are older investments and there's opportunities to reinvent some of those. Preserving the resources of the city and connecting the assets together. The assets being the neighborhoods, the activity centers, the physical assets. And here's another list of opportunities. So capitalizing your needs, maintain your natural environment, built environment, and support vibrant neighborhoods. In terms of moving the plan forward, and implementing the plan, there's a few action items. These are projects. The zoning update is an important one. And this is something that the city has moved forward on, and it's a consultant team that's going to be working on this project. It's a really important project. So it's very encouraging to see, because for me, I think I'm less of a policy long frame and action oriented. I think the projects for me are really equally important to the policies and the plan. So improvements to the recreation system, I know that cities investing in that's another highlighted project area. Town government partnership, SUNY in the city, whatever you want to call it, but I think everyone around here knows that SUNY enrollments are declining. And this is something that could be is a challenge. If the city and the SUNY can work even harder to address it at the state level, it's a concern. And it's also something that can be a real opportunity to increase that interaction. Downtown revitalization, we don't want to remember that and keep our eyes on that. You know, it's been a big push for the city to make that happen. That needs to be a push because it's a big aspect. It's really important to the character, vitality of communities, as is the waterfront. And community connections, local and regional, but these are important. Continuing to find ways to bring people together socially, culturally, and physically, you know, through mobility improvements and trail system improvements, things that you're already working on. These are some of the more important project areas for the city, and tracking them and reporting that to be well to celebrate and be thank you for your accomplishments, and also go to be sure that it is getting done. You know? And so that your thriving city is an equitable city, a vibrant city, resilient city. And now, turn it over to Emily. So this is the waterfront is a big part of this effort, and this I think has been funded by the project is partly funded by the waterfront revitalization program from New York State. Some of this plan. Yeah.
Thanks.
So this is an overview of the final draft of the LWRP, as we often refer to it. So that's what local waterfront revitalization program. We have a lot of acronyms with a lot of these projects. But in terms of what the LWRP is, it focuses, as John mentioned, on the waterfront area. And it incorporates a piece also called the Harbor Management Plan, or sometimes the HMP, that's like more abbreviation. So I think of the LWRP focuses on mostly the land side of the waterfront, where the harbor management plan is really about the water usage. So the harbor management plan has points that cover how do users interact, whether that's swimming, fishing, boating, you know, are there conflicts among them? Is there too much congestion? How does that affect habitat and water quality? And how our controls over those things or monitoring of those things regulated and who's in charge of that. Those pieces in this case are actually woven into the local waterfront revitalization program. They can be handled as separate documents, but in this case, we want to handle them together. And then the LWRP itself really focuses on access to the waterfront, providing access for the community, to the public, recreation, habitat. Can any of these things tie into the economy? In some cases, there are certain types of businesses that might really benefit from the waterfront and others that depend on it, like a marina, for example, whereas a restaurant might benefit from being located on the waterfront. And then there are other pieces of culture and history that also tie in. And so the program with the report that results from it outlines a vision for the waterfront, similar to the way that the comprehensive plan outlines a vision for the city, and identifies some key projects. So we take a look at the whole city, areas along the waterfront within a boundary that we identify, and I'll bring that up in just a moment. And then we look at those areas and say, okay, what projects can we consider that support this vision that we have for the waterfront moving forward? This is a program that is, as John mentioned, outlined by the state. They kind of dictate what needs to be included in it. They outline a bunch of policies that we incorporate, and we make some notes on those policies as to how they apply to the city. And then who's responsible for management, how does it get implemented, and how does it get enforced? So we will start with the actual boundary. So there actually is, if you're not aware, there is currently a waterfront overlay district in the city. And it's much narrower than what you see outlined in green here. It primarily hugs the lakefront. And as we picked up an earlier draft of this program, we realized the river had been left out. But that's a pretty important waterfront here. So we expanded the boundary to include the Saranac Riverfront. And then the harbor management area, and then the state guidelines dictate that that can be up to 1,500 feet from the shoreline or the municipal boundaries. So that's what you see the blue dashed line there represent. And then within this, because it's such a large area, we broke it up into 5 sub areas, which we called the North End, the Cumberland Wilcox sub area, the downtown or Marina sub area, the Old Bay sub area, and then the Saranac. And the downtown sub area actually informed the DRI. This project has been going on for quite a while, and we had a first draft that was completed around 2016. That was then sent off for review by the state. And in that time, the DRI kind of came into being. So that downtown area already has some draft projects identified. So it served as a great foundation for the city's DRI application. So within this overall boundary, we did a similar kind of analysis that happens with the comprehensive plan. You kind of look at the space you have, what are the opportunities, what are some of the constraints, and what are your overall goals for the space. In the northern portions, a lot of the riverfront properties as well are privately owned, so there's not a lot of public access to the waterfront. In the northern part of the city, of course, with the exception to the beach, very large, amazing waterfront access there. If you move further south, it becomes largely private, and a lot of the waterfront along the Saranac River as well. However, there are a lot of parks, there are a lot of historic sites, and even along the Saranac, you kind of have semi-private space in that some large land areas are actually the high school and the swimming center. So the community does have some access to those properties. And another one of the challenges we kind of face from the southern section, we've got the railroad tracks there, the steep shoreline, so that makes access a little bit more difficult for the waterfront. But on the outside, that change probably because it's a fantastic view. So how can we look at spaces like that, identify things that we really want, assets that we want to build upon? So our next phase was to start looking at what kind of studies do we think we want to do on properties that are not quite ready for construction yet. And then what are some of the projects that we might want to implement? So some of the overall goals were really improving connectivity. So to and from the water, between the waterfront and downtown, how can we incorporate complete streets? There are a lot of trails. Can we connect those trails to one another where gaps exist? How do we enhance what's already there? There are some park spaces or public spaces that could incorporate more. Can we implement some of the remaining DRI projects that relate to the waterfront? Can we add more interpretive and educational planning to increase awareness? And how can we provide some of the non-physical access, so visual linkages to the waterfront And do all of this while still keeping the environment in mind, being sensitive to natural resources. So in the north end, just highlighting a few of the projects here, and again, all of this is in the reports of film online, if you want to take a closer look. Some of the studies identified, and they do correspond to the dots on the map over here. Some waterfront cleanup along City Beach, some trail easements. So one of the ideas was to, there are some existing trails from the boardwalk, so the paved path that connects out to Karen Fleury along Route 9 there. Can there be a more waterfront trail? That's a longer term goal that would require some easements, but something to think about and study. A water quality study. In the past, over the years, there have been some water quality issues in the area of the beach. So just taking a little bit of a deeper dive into what causes that and how that can be improved. And then Cumberland Corners coordination, some alliteration there. But thinking about recreation in general, and you kind of go beyond just the city boundary to some of the just other asset development within the region. In terms of projects, so in addition to the future waterfront trail, can the Cumberland streetscape be improved? We could create a Cumberland Bay Trail, so to speak. Maybe that's just complete street elements that really make the route along Route 9, that is the Empire State Trail, can that be safer for cyclists and pedestrians and really improve connectivity there. And then City Beach, this is a lot packed into one diagram. We did complete City Beach implementation plan last year that really expands in some more detail. That's also available on the city website. But it incorporates everything from adding a broader trail network to someday looking at having performance space. Maybe there are some buildings that get incorporated that could be used for concessions or a new bathhouse or a multi-purpose room that could be available to the community. Could there be a playground? Could we, do further trail connections? Still respecting there are some wetlands right on the property, so respecting that space as well. And then a highlight that's shown there, which is the bright green triangle with the larger City Beach diagram. Can we provide a hand launch at Skomoki Creek and some parking there? Where the goals that came up frequently was getting more kayak and non-motorized access to the water. And then moving south to the Cumberland Wilcox area, there are a couple of properties that are currently privately owned, so that they could turn into some really interesting projects. Whether it's providing more direct waterfront access, spot A there, just above the Triple B. We looked at having like a neighborhood scale park with area B as a potential expansion of that residential neighborhood, tying in the street grid a little bit more. And then C was the extension of the more waterfront trail, bringing that right to Wilcox Dock. So if that could all be implemented, you can then have a more waterfront trail that can continue all the way from City Beach down to Wilcox Dock. And then within the Wilcox area itself, expanding on that a little bit more, incorporating some more recreation elements. We heard a lot of feedback over the years about there are a lot of families coming through there. It would be great to have a playground, pavilions, and restrooms, things like that, incorporated into the space. And then continuing streetscape improvements right along Cumberland. Again, that section is part of the Empire State Trail. So when we do think about all these projects, we're also thinking about potential funding sources for them and leveraging different things against one another. So that recognition of the Empire State Trail does help as you pursue some grant funding. Moving down to the downtown area, this one is very busy. Obviously, there's a lot of activity down here already, and a lot of assets down here that people really wanted to build upon. So in addition to waterfront property along the Saranac that it was thought about in the future, this would be great if we were building this out as a more commercial area to acquire those properties, incorporate some mixed use, or the warehouse area on J Street there is really a great spot. It's waterfront. We're very close to it, with the exception of the railroad tracks. So for things to think about in the future, some properties that were pointed out little one on Bridge Street, just kind of tucked in the background there. We just thought that would be great to create a little pocket park that would connect into McDonough. Coming up with design guidelines, and again, the whole Harborside area is currently being looked at in a separate project, so it does address, kind of that whole area where we have the multiple letters called out there, but between improvements to the water resource recovery facility, access to the waterfront itself, the Harborside development, maybe there'll be some mixed use going in there in the future. All that's kind of being studied separately. And then how does the former MLD property get incorporated into that? So that's kind of all being addressed and going into kind of the concept design stage now. And then some of the other projects out there, we're looking at the streetscapes going down Dock Street and Bridge Street. And continuing the Bridge Street improvements through the downtown grant program that's already been out there. Can that be continued? And McDonough Park, so just a little snapshot here, which we actually presented 2 years ago. We considered this under the DRI funding, but providing kayak access within the park to the water there, or more accessible fishing access as well. And then extending some streetscape enhancements downtown, and also continuing the downtown signage and art efforts that have already been underway. So a lot of these have been started or mentioned as part of the DRI, and we'd like to pick those back up and continue those. And as we move further south to the old base area, there are again a couple of properties that we'll look at as someday it'd be nice to incorporate those for recreation access or waterfront access if possible. And then looking at the museum campus, so some of the museums are kind of handled individually, but it would be nice to consider them as a whole and how they can build off of one another. If there can be some joint collaboration between them, access to them. And if one needs capital improvement, it can be kind of a shared program. So that was a big study that was considered. And then using both Sailor's Point and Sailor's Beach, which is very easy to confuse the two. Providing better access to those, potentially doing some rehabilitation at Sailor's Beach. Access is pretty difficult when you have to cross the railroad tracks, go up and over. But can that be looked at and explored to improve both the safety of the waterfront, whether it's lighting or visual as well as physical access. And then other projects, enhancing the Terry Gordon Lake Pad, which is great, it's paved. It's very close to the waterfront, but in some places you may not see the waterfront. So can trees be limbed up a little bit? Can any invasive species be monitored just to get that visual connection to the water? And it was also suggested that some lighting be provided along the trail. And then we went a little further into the UF Oval itself. Not looking at really doing too much permanent there. It is a historic district, but the space itself really works very well as a flexible active recreation space. But at the northern end, there was interest in providing a water supply to the paved area that kind of serves as an ice rink, but allowing that to be a little bit easier by actually having water access right there. And then building upon that, could there be a restroom provided, a small pavilion provided? And some landscaping being enhanced, and maybe complement the chapel. And then finally moving to the upper Saranac upriver, making sure we didn't forget the river. As I kind of mentioned previously, the SUNY campus has a lot of recreational assets. Can those be connected to in places where there might not be links now? And then the newly acquired recently annexed property that comes off of Reeves Lane, so you see that at the far west here, looking at what the best type of public access is there, but there's definitely interest in making sure that the community has access to the waterfront within that property. And then the area C and D, 2 park and green spaces, looking at master planning those in a way. They really aren't utilized that heavily. They're a little bit more passive in their spaces, but small improvements can still be made there to improve access to the riverfront, even just fishing access. And then you see the dashed line that kind of goes through the river, and it's popped up on a few of these, there's been interest in a blueway trail or a whitewater access plan. So pursuing that, looking at that feasibility study. And then in terms of typical projects, Fort Brown, there's definitely been some interest in providing some parking there. You kind of drive past it right now. I don't even realize that it's a place. There's a small little monument on the ground on the hill there. But if parking could be provided, if there could be sidewalk connection to it, but maybe easier to access, and then enhancing signage so that people realize that it really is a destination and can learn about history. And then you can see the trail kind of goes off the image there. So the idea was to connect that to South Platte Street Park. So it's great, it's very active space, but making those spaces connected. And then within the park itself, can water access be provided? So Fort Brown, the bank is a bit steep, probably not possible to get into the water very easily there. But within the park, it's not quite as steep, and with some access for a kayak launch, can launch be provided there. So those are just the quick highlights of all the different projects that have been talked about. And when we started this, we actually went through every single planning document that had been, the past couple of decades before we were brought on board. Made a really giant spreadsheet of all of them. It was available if you want to look at it. And then kind of went through and said, what still makes sense for today and what supports the community's goals now. And this project kind of paused for a little bit while the comprehensive plan was brought up to date to make sure that the goals were in sync with one another. We didn't want to have one plan adopted and not be supported by the other one. So then from here, where do we go next? We have this big plan, 200 pages, and now what happens to it? So the first step is to amend the waterfront overlay district. So that's expanding that boundary that our plan is adopted. We just expand it to coincide with what you've seen here. And the goals are to provide some flexibility in the types of development that happen along the waterfront, while still balancing that protection with the natural resources and making sure it meets the goals of the plan. And then there are 2 local laws that are required. And this is just to help make sure there's a way to actually implement the goal. So the first is the consistency review law. So if a project is proposed, the law comes into play, and it just means that, say you were to submit a project to the planning board, they would look over this review form and make sure that it supports the goals of the local waterfront revitalization plan, and that's just for things that are within the waterfront overlay district. And then the harbor management law, similarly, another required law, it just focuses on those water pieces. So from here, we have these documents available online. There is the opportunity for anyone to provide any final comment, ask questions. If we've forgotten something, let us know. But if there are no major changes to make, then these documents go on for review by the county and by the state. And you see what the comments they have. If there are any changes, we address those. And those final drafts go to the council. And then you need to go through seeker review before they can be adopted. But we hope that that can happen over the next 6 months or so. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Yeah.
Just a couple. So, does the Imperial Dam provide any or create any issues? And one that I believe it's not really being used right now. Is it? I don't know who maintains it, but it is definitely creates a it affects the river. And so future plans for the river, I think, need to include what's going to happen with Imperial Dam.
Yeah, I don't know what the plans are for the dam, if there are any plans for its future, but I know, having a dam in general certainly affects fish migration as well as it's going to make your water levels and things too.
Well, it's because above the dam right now, it's all slack water,
Right.
which sort of suggests a new one, right? And if the dam's not there, then that's going to significantly change that area of slack water. And the other question was, I always hate to bring it up because it causes a lot of angst all over town, but. The Durkee Street lot was not included in any of the. Your bullet points. And I know it causes a lot of angst for people, but it's definitely riverfront property. And so. How does that fit? How does that?
I think it has a letter on that downtown area for an area of interest. Our involvement in the LWRP predates, the current plans for the Durkee lot, but there was always interest in a mixed use development, having something that provided public access to the waterfront. So we're also actually working on the Riverwalk project that's going to be implemented. So that's what's soon. Well, it is up.
Right, it is up to bid one.
Yeah, so we're definitely, these have all kind of played into one another. So that was definitely providing public access. The hope is that whatever happens with the lot itself, that it does provide some mixed use qualities, different uses at the same time, but also provides another connection for the community. So we hope there'll be a connection between the Betty Little Arts Park and the Riverwalk, and any future streetscape improvements that happen along Durkee itself, and really tie all the space together. Because again, the LWRP goals are improving that access, improving the visual access in the one as well.
Yeah.
And making the most of whatever uses are in place along the waterfront.
So I do have sort of guess, unless I don't want to step on it, but so the state. I mean, has sort of a record of just coming up with money or not coming up with money. And it's kind of, when money becomes available, people start to scramble for projects now. So I'm assuming that one of the goals of this project is to smooth that process out, right? So that there will be a project in hand for when money shows up, rather than getting money and trying to come up with a plan. So,
Yeah, that's correct. I think one thing that I only touched on earlier was that the LWRP is really good for identifying projects in a broad way. And then you get the legacy projects, some of which have been realized in the DRI. And we're doing like now, like there's work occurring at City Beach and there's stuff occurring on the harbor side. And we have the Betty Little Arts Park and also the Riverwalk, which is going to be. And the one thing that's tied in consistently with the LWRP, as Emily touched on also, is the connectivity. It's the walkability, it's the accessibility. So being able to go from the Strand, go down to the Riverwalk, and then have recreational access along the Saranac and ultimately to Lake Champlain are overarching goals for this program.
And as you mentioned, having this and having projects identified is absolutely helpful when it comes to seeking funding for projects. So for example, if the city wanted the next round of the combined funding application CSA process, they can take a project from this plan, because each of the construction projects and the studies as well. Within the plan or the project section of the document, there's a little summary of what the project is, what policies of the LWRP it supports. And those are all helpful when you're going to fill out your grant application. So some of the legwork is kind of done in a bullet point form, a ballpark cost estimate. So how much money do you go and ask for? So we've done a little bit of that work and just a few concept plans. So that really helps as you go to say, okay, what's next? What can we move forward with? Well, we have this idea. Here's kind of what we want to do with it, and here's how much we think it's going to cost. Let's go with that one. And it also helps if you have a project in mind, if you can tie it back to a process that the community has supported. And these are projects that we didn't come up with. Everybody who came to the meetings came up with. And it's also supported by the comprehensive plan. So that also helps.
Absolutely. The state really likes to support programs that get community support. So those that are identified in the LWRP and stuff that are really create the foundation for those daughter projects that go through the CFAs or the DRIs. It's really important. And so that's where it's really useful to get the public input on these projects.
And one of the funding sources out there is actually LWRP implementation funds, so it really kind of creates step two.
I wanted to expand on what my friend Kim Hartson said about his existing projects.
Okay.
Walkability, you mentioned in the general plan and specifics is important. But the farmer's market has been moved, so it's essentially inaccessible by walking. We either have to go down a steep embankment over a bridge or through Durkee Street, which has no borders, so you can't walk on it with cars. Is there any plan to address projects that are in the work and adjust them?
So I'm not involved in the harbor side management master plan or the harbor side master plan. But I know that's kind of looking at how all the pieces
So
beyond the railroad tracks put together, but there are also pieces.
the local waterfront revitalization program, isn't that harbor side? Isn't the harbor on the side of the water?
I mean, the area, so the area referred to as harbor side is that Dock Street area, where the parking lot is down, where the farmer's market moves to, up to the waterfront, where the marina is. That's referred to as harbor side, and there is a separate, master plan process underway for that. But that will be addressing at least some walkability and connectivity aspects. And under the local waterfront revitalization program, some of the projects identified are how can we make streetscape improvements? How can we add sidewalks where they're missing? Green Street is one of them. We want to make sure though that that doesn't come before the rest of the waterway remediation work that has been going on under NICE to address the past contamination. So that was an access route for them. So we didn't want to put that too early in the game where heavy equipment, heavy machinery might destroy the investment. But that is definitely still a priority. And it was one under the DRI that we just couldn't get to yet. And then there are plans to also try to improve Dock Street, Bridge Street, look at all those streetscapes and sidewalks, see how accessibility and connection can be improved. And safety, like what, especially where there are missing sidewalks, you know, where can they be?
I had one other point in regard to access to the waterway. The Prime building is turning its back on the Saguenay River. Can anything be done about that?
Now,
I think the answer is no. Of course, things that aren't working, you can't adjust. Am I right? That's what I got from what you said so far.
I mean, I don't have influence over what happens on that property. I think one of the things that could is the fact that the city's taking a comprehensive look at all of its zoning right now. Again, that's not us, several projects that was just recently awarded and we'll be getting started soon. But it's really, so the way we talk about the comprehensive plan, identifying goals, and the zoning is the tool, the mechanism that helps to make sure that development, the land uses support those goals.
I understand those procedures, but I'm asking, how does this apply to specifics?
So if they're, whether it's the Prime project and the Durkee Street project or any other development project, once this is adopted, moving forward, if somebody brings a project up, because I would like to do X here, that comes back to that consistency review form that I mentioned. So when it goes to before the planning board to review, part of the process will be looking at that form and saying, does this meet the goals of our plan? And then it's up to the board as to how it moves forward. Yeah.
Currently, that project is being held up by an order for an environmental impact statement. Or at least I think an environmental impact study to be conducted.
One was conducted.
I think they wanted to move it. I might be wrong. But, does that, so in general, development along the waterfront, wherever it is. What would be the environmental impact? Studies that would need to be done or have it? And who would be doing those?
They have not already been done. The amount of a study that would need to be performed. Would really be project specific, depending on what the nature of the project is. The LWRP and the process moving forward from here does not negate the need to go through the secret process. So that would really, for each project, would determine whether the full study needs to be performed or whether it's most likely less impact in the shorter form can be completed. That would not change. This is just an additional review form that comes in.
Is there any? Would there be any advantage to doing those ahead of time before, in other words, the projects are planned and then held up because of an environmental impact study that shows that the project can't work or will need remediation to help. I mean, at what point should those studies happen?
The requirements of the secret process require a level of detail for the projects in question that isn't addressed in something as conceptual and as broad as a local waterfront revitalization program.
Yeah.
So once you get to the detailed design phase, at that point, when you can speak to specific impacts, that's when you would conduct the secret process for those projects.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think the thing is with LWRPs is that indicated is. This is kind of policy based. And it's about public lands and connectivity. The policies can influence what occurs on individual private property, and that's where you want to have the impact. It's not getting into the weeds specifically on a property by property basis, but it provides kind of a framework in which you would look to address property improvements by an individual property.
So I'm new to Plattsburgh and avid walker, thank you, and I have walked every little bit of your map here in and out, and I'm dreaming about the connectivity of all these trails, so I can just walk and walk and walk. And not hit dead ends and have to, and so I'm very excited to hear all the plans. I don't know a lot about city development, but I know bringing in the tourism to such a beautiful area is huge, in growth and every way. I saw on the timeline that there was a study done that said a hotel located here would be a good investment. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, I'm new, so maybe this is all old news, but.
It predates me.
Okay.
It was one of the studies that was done examining, what is now the Harborside area. So I guess in some sense, it kind of informed that maybe something like that might be well suited to that spot. And now it's really, the focus is, okay, let's look at this a little bit more comprehensively and see what the best uses for the overall property are. I don't know how plans have gone moving forward, whether a hotel is still under consideration for the space. But it wasn't one time.
Yeah,
We have had multiple studies done for that particular area that have indicated the highest and best use for it as a hotel. One was from the early 2000s and one was done about 4 years ago, and they both came to the same conclusion.
And that information can be found online on the harbor side.
I don't think that one, the most recent study is under the DRI page on the city's website, but I believe it's still up there, yes.
What would have been the criteria for the best use? Is it economic impact?
Economic impact, whether there are similar establishments in the area, whether there's an established need for the service being provided, housing, whatever it might be, and a number of other things.
Yeah, there's a number of factors on those highest and best use, and there's a number of things that are factored in, and a lot of it is based on the need of the community.
Hi, my name's Joe Ferris, and my family owns a small little green space that's next to the Habitat. 100 Margaret.
Yeah.
And, I've got ideas and visions for, what that space could be to serve myself and family as well as the community. And, if there was interest from you guys or the city or who it entails, I'd be interested in talking about, you know, adding it as a piece of what makes Plattsburgh good. And also, I'm curious as to if there are like, you know, grant opportunities and collaborative opportunities.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I say yes, you can come and talk to me, but you might want to talk to the folks sitting right behind you first. Mayor's pretty cool about it.
You're talking there?
Yeah. You've got open door policy, call them. But yeah, I mean, I think small little pieces like that around the city are really part of that whole, like whether it's the neighborhood goal that it can play into, whether it's just a small green space that's available to the city, whether it's a small community garden. I don't know what your vision is, but and one of the other things for downtown is little like small play spaces and things like that. So I think there are a lot of ways that people like you who might have a space they're willing to share, or if there's just some underutilized property and people have ideas, I think that's great.
Now, is your property the one that's the green space?
It's just, if you're facing the copycat, it's to the right.
Right,
Yeah. It's a work in progress.
no, because we identified like a space in there, and I don't know your space specifically. Because normally when I'm up on Margaret Street, I'm looking to grab something to eat and drink pretty quickly. But that being said, there's like you identified a spot for a pocket park or something like that could be useful, because there isn't a lot of playground type environment right in the city. I think those things are very, I appreciate you bringing that up, because those are sorts of things that can kind of stitch it downtown together.
Yeah.
And it's a neat idea. So I imagine, talk to the city, you can reach out to us. We can see what other opportunities are available from grant funding and those sorts of things.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Something I've noticed is, past development that's happened, like trails put in, and then upkeep is just neglected. And I go through these little trails and I think, wow, at one point, someone put a lot of time, attention and money into this. And then it's no longer manicured or maintained, and it almost feels like a little unsafe. Even coming here, I walked a lot of this property that we're talking about tonight, and I just thought, you know, gosh, I don't want to be here. It doesn't feel like it's maintained and safe for me to be. So is that a consideration as we're talking about these projects as maintenance? I mean, bringing these things that have already been done back to where they need to be, and then a plan for maintaining things so they can move forward and improve.
I mean, it's definitely, I would say, if not the most common, one of the most common conversations that happen. And some of it is just things that, you know, get beyond our control, whether it's a recession and staff reduction that occurs. But I think one of the comments that sometimes comes up is, can we form a friends group? Can the community do it? And I think that's a great option, and a way to support, you know, the city staff that does get, they're about to start plowing. They're not going to be able to necessarily maintain a trail. So, you know, I don't know if there's an opportunity to get some of your friends together and start that, or hop on Facebook, get some students involved maybe. I think there's a lot of networking that can be done, and sort of that social collaboration that can help to maintain spaces when it's, you know, a lot of investment goes into the planning process for them. People come and share their ideas, but it would be wonderful if those same user groups take a day and go out and do a little maintenance. Like the state parks, does I Love My Park Day early in May, so maybe something similar.
Yeah.
Couple times a year would be great.
I would say that as a follow-up to your question, I think it's really well placed, because we've all seen parks and trails and stuff that have gone neglected, or there've been budgetary cuts and people haven't been able to staff it. And it looks, it's kind of a pox sometimes on the parks and on the community, and. I think like meetings like this, where people are coming in and voicing their thoughts and opinions and getting engaged in the process are hugely important. And because people get engaged, parks shouldn't be built by consultants, they should be driven by the communities. And so people that want trails networks and all these different aspects to it, the community really has to drive it. So we really like to be, just listen and put down what you folks are talking about and what you want, because ultimately it's yours and you are the stewards of it. And so if you love your park, you love your trail, you love your butterfly garden, all those things, you're much more likely to get the friends groups, as Emily touched on. So people that will take ownership of it, because, once a park is built, it really has to be part. The community has to take it under its wing and shepherd it along.
And we can try to, provide you with low maintenance materials and efficient light fixtures and native plants and things like that, but at a certain point, we have to walk away. But we hope that it's something that we can design to be easily maintained, but hope there's support.
Yeah, we do specifically try to keep things as user friendly as possible, as maintenance free as possible, giving an individual community's resources.
Somebody might have mentioned this, or you guys probably thought about it in the past, but. When I went to California, Los Angeles, and they had these outdoor exercise machines like all over the parks. And I just thought they were awesome because they're such.
Been over to the trail and look up stuff.
Have I? No.
There are a few.
There are.
Okay.
But they're not like he's talking about.
Right,
He's
they're
talking
not
about
quite
full on
developed.
vertical, like really cool, they're just like art installation.
Yeah.
That
They're
they
pretty,
can be used.
they're pretty colorful and artistic, and I mean, they just seem like a really productive use of people's energy.
They
Yeah.
seem to be growing in popularity, I would say, right up there with disc golf. We are starting to get some requests for, adult exercise equipment alongside the kids' playground. You can come together.
We do get those. There's a number of them, there are a number of different levels. We're looking at citing a number of pieces of exercise equipment for adults at one of our parks down in Pleasant Valley right now.
Yeah, so there is an older version of that, over at Wilcox-Dock. It is one of the things that's noted, in the goals for enhancements at Wilcox-Dock, kind of bringing that back up to date. Hasn't been quite maintained. I would say. Yeah,
So one of your slides, you showed that a possible use that or possible development at the city beach was an event space.
Mhm.
Is there, that your studies indicated what types of events would work in this area? And what kind of audience draw or tourism draw that you might have? I mean, one of our events that we do, right, is Battle of Plattsburgh, which, I always thought we could really capitalize on from a reenactor point of view. Reenactor events draw lots of people. I'm not sure that outdoor concerts would have the same kind of draw. And so I'm just wondering if you guys have done a study or if those sorts of studies are available.
we have not done a study that got as detailed as what types of events. But we did look at, in coming up with a concept for the space, providing these sort of band shells or performance stages, but at two different scales. So there's a larger one and there's a smaller one that can both kind of front on these open lawn areas. So really it can host whatever it might be best suited for, whether that's a big concert, whether you want to ride us back in Saratoga, be the next day or a few hours away, pretty well positioned. So whether you have that kind of level of event, or like I said, maybe it's something really big with Plattsburgh and it plays off the waterfront and you've got some ships out there or something. That can you envision something bigger, but hopefully the idea is to create a space that can just lend itself to those types of events, whatever, whatever they will be,
Yeah.
large or small.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but what we looked at when we evaluated the programming of that is just what's been successful elsewhere. I mean, we looked at SPAC in Saratoga, we looked at ideas of a great lawn. Great lawns, like where this would be, are wonderful because they have endless programming possibilities, and it's a lawn. And what you can do there is only limited by your imagination. So we looked at that as something where you don't have to build the infrastructure necessarily to have events there. You could have massive, goodness knows, massive, massive flea markets.
We had 97,000 people here to fish, and that was on base before the airport took over the space. And it actually was pretty amazing because it did not negatively affect the people in town here. Didn't even know there were 97,000 people out there.
Well, what's fascinating. What's fascinating about it is we looked at it, we looked at a lot of communities in terms of what their assets are. And you look at the location of what Plattsburgh is, it being like a performing arts venue or something like that, just seemed like it could fit. It could be part of the programming of something up there on City Beach. And you looked at it in terms of, being up there, it's not necessarily, it's easy on, easy off, not necessarily affecting the infrastructure of the daily lives of the folks right in the city. We said, that's something to consider. And, but from a market study, it was just based on other conditions that were similarly successful elsewhere.
I'm in the business of taught theater at the college. And there's nothing sadder than a theater, than an empty theater, right? So I would just, my tendency is to suggest that building the actual space without an idea of what's going to be in it is probably medicine.
No, absolutely not.
But having a place where, because the big concerts set up their own stages.
Right.
Yeah, right.
We were just looking for flexibility.
Yeah.
For whatever happens down the road.
This is city planning one-on-one question. So all these ideas are fantastic and so exciting. And I hear that grant money comes in maybe from the state, but otherwise, how are these projects funded?
Okay, so, it would depend on the exact project. Because there might be, like, let's say you want to put in a fishing dock somewhere. Yes, you could look to, if it's identified in this plan, look for the LWRP implementation funding. Sometimes for projects like that, it's also worth getting private companies involved, like let's say your Orbis or REI or outdoor interest companies. They're like, okay, we want a fishing dock, so let's reach out to some fishing companies. They often have small grant programs, little support community projects like that. And then some of your companies like Lowe's or Home Depot often have a give back type program. So I think there's a lot of networking you can try to do that way. Other local businesses might be willing to support. And I would say it's one of those public-private partnerships where you can just get everybody together. As much interest as you can rally. I think diversifying your support is great. Spread the word, see who comes out. Might be something where you incorporate volunteer time with, city time, and then, maybe a hire contractor as well, something like that. It's really going to vary project per project, but I think what sometimes people forget is the business side of things. I think a lot of times we look to the government or just a private donor. I forget that there are your local companies and some larger companies that might be more.
Yeah, we're actually building a pier right now on Finger Lakes, and that's funded in part by Empire State Development. And it's not about just making a park, it's about the number of jobs it's going to create. And so by doing that, you're getting private businesses that are buying into it and contributing more and investing more than actually even what the grant is worth, which is really exciting because what you're doing is you're really creating the foundation for private investment too. And so that benefits the entire community and the local economy.
We said, smaller projects, or sometimes the first step is getting the site surveyed. And in some cases, a local survey company says, oh, I want to do it, that's my backyard, I'll do it for free, or just pay me $1,000 for my guy, and I'll give you the survey. So I think, just that awareness that these projects are out there as goals can stimulate some interest you might not realize, and support that you might not realize.
Yeah, the one thing that's interesting about parks is in general, for every dollar that's invested, the communities get $7 out. So they're really good investments. We call parks soft infrastructure, parks and trails, and it really helps businesses. That's ultimately the goal. So there's that synergy.
The connectivity and getting people to move from place to place, bringing some more foot traffic to your downtown.
Exactly.
But you all design, and then this goes to the city, right? And then the city initiates all these little sparks. Is that right? I mean, how does that work? As far as like, who's initiating, like, let's look at this project.
Go ahead, John. I think you are.
I was gonna say, you might be the spark right there.
So, my son Sean was a baby, my other son was still a baby, and we had one of the other. I go to chair of my town. And we built it all the doctors. And it cost the city nothing. Except that they had the right of it. Fast forward, one of the advanced projects was a developer building in our town. We had a trail plan. Developer loved the trail, he was real activist as well, a big skier. He built the trail as part of his development. Another phase of the same trail. The city had a design, had a grant, and the era funding, the recovery funding during the, when all the toxic assets that crashed, right?
2008.
Yeah. Millions of dollars are available, we had a project ready to go on the shelf. That kind of bill. So I think it's all of those things and maybe more, I do think that. There's a lesson I want to share that was given to me back in the day. Is because I was always a fighter. I grew up with nine kids. So I was always a fighter. One of my professors said, John, you have to fight everything. You can say yes to some things. No. So anyway, I think that's part of it, is for all of us to get to yes on a project, even building a trail, to become a developer, become people who don't want it. So I do think it's part about getting, with all these things, getting to like, what can we do as a community, get behind it together. And how it gets done, might be a little bit of everything. We start with just volunteers and it could grow. But these things don't really always start from the city hall. My sense of my experience is a good leadership doesn't necessarily come up that year, but can help facilitate,
Building.
help make it happen. But even then, no city can write all these checks, they have some, right? But
I think just quick example of getting more art downtown, as we were working on the Bentonville Arts Park. The desire was there to put sculptures in. We didn't dictate what those were, we just provided the space.
Yeah.
We said, okay, we'll incorporate some lighting in case you want to light these sculptures at night, but we'll just provide you a spot to put it, and you can decide how you want to approach it. Involve the local arts community and what they want to see there and how you want to handle this, whether it's permanent or they change every year or whatever. We'll provide you the space to let the community get involved.
right, the other source of energy is the university and college too, right? I think that's part of the plan that I see is a really important part is help. The more we can make Plattsburgh, the SUNY experience, whatever it is, and the city experience united, the more you can make Plattsburgh a more interesting place for folks who want to enroll. Because that's really, it's a big challenge, that's a big issue with this plan, it's a hidden challenge, not just hidden, it's really important that enrollment, if it can be stabilized and maybe come back, it's gonna be really key, it's an important part of the city's future. And so this connection of trails and people, it could become a big, could be important, that can be important, aspect of, making things happen.
Hopefully some of those students become future residents.
That's the hope.
Maybe even later,
Just might.
or a planner, or a landscape architect,
Like,
right? All right,
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Louise. Good job.